In the heart of the land, where the hills curved like sleeping giants and the winds carried songs older than memory, there lay a village called Ekunle. It was a place of rhythm, not merely the rhythm of feet on dust or palms on skin, but the rhythm of life itself. Every sunrise in Ekunle began with a beat. The pounding of pestles and mortars, the clapping of women calling children home, the stamping of dancers at dusk, all blended into a melody that told the story of the people. The villagers often said that to be born in Ekunle was to be born to a song. But among all the sounds that echoed through that village, none was as sacred, none as feared, as the sound of my family's drum. They called it Okanoran, the heart of heaven. It was no ordinary drum. Its body was carved from the heartwood of an ancient lightning tree that had once split open under the wrath of a storm. The elders said the first ancestor, Arua the Truthful, had shaped the drum on that very night when thunder spoke and lightning wrote upon the sky. Arua, the first drummer, had mixed the sap of that tree with his own blood, sealing a covenant that the drum would forever speak truth, and only truth. When struck by clean hands, its voice brought healing, rain, and peace. But when beaten in pride or deceit, it cried with thunder, and brought ruin. That drum had rested in my family's care for as long as anyone could remember. Passed from father to son, it was both gift and burden, a living relic of the ancestors, bound by rules older than any law. The current keeper of the drum was Adara, a man whose presence carried the calm of evening rivers and the firmness of mountains. His hands, broad and strong, knew every rhythm the earth had ever spoken. He could speak to rain clouds with a drumbeat. He could make a crying child sleep with a whisper of rhythm. When he played, birds paused mid-flight, and even the elders closed their eyes to listen. But Adara was not merely a drummer. He was a bridge, a man who stood between the living and the dead, between the voice of the ancestors and the heartbeat of the village. And his only son, Kanu, watched him with equal parts admiration and impatience. Kanu was young, sharp-eyed, restless. His spirit burned with questions. To him, the world beyond Ekunle, the cities spoken of by traders, the markets where gold and silk shimmered, called louder than the rhythms of his father's drum. "Why must the drum stay in our family?" he often asked. Adara would smile and say, "Because it knows our name, Kanu. It remembers the sound of our blood." But Kanu would laugh and shake his head. "A drum that remembers blood? I want a life that remembers my name, not a drum that owns it." The villagers adored Adara, but they whispered about his son. They said Kanu was too proud, too ambitious, too modern. They said his eyes looked past tradition, as if he could see a world where the drum meant nothing. Yet there was one thing no one could deny: Kanu had rhythm in his bones. Even as a boy, he could mimic his father's beats with uncanny precision. When his small hands touched the smaller practice drum Adara made for him, something wild happened. The air seemed to shimmer. His father would pause, watching, as if the ancestors themselves leaned closer to listen. "You have my gift," Adara told him one evening under the orange dusk. "But gifts can turn into curses if the heart behind them is unclean. Remember that." Kanu had nodded, though his eyes were elsewhere, following the horizon. Every festival in Ekunle began with the sound of Adara's drum. The villagers would gather under the great Irako tree, faces glowing in the firelight. The women sang praises, the men stomped their feet, and the children watched in wonder as Adara began his sacred rhythm, the one only he was allowed to play. Dum, dum, dum-da-da-dum. Each stroke carried a meaning: the pulse of the earth, the breath of the sky, the promise of truth. And every year, before the performance, Adara would kneel before the drum and whisper an ancient prayer. No one knew the words, not even Kanu. It was said the prayer bound the player's soul to honesty, for as long as he drummed, his lies would fall away like dust. Then he would rise, eyes glowing faintly from the reflection of the fire, and the drum would answer him, not like an instrument, but like an echoing spirit. The sound filled the night, deep and alive, rippling through the trees, rolling across the hills. People said the thunder above always paused when Adara played, as if listening to its younger brother. But Kanu heard something else that night, a challenge. Each strike felt like a reminder of the greatness he had not yet achieved. After the festival, when the fires died and the dancers slept, Kanu approached the drum. The moonlight fell across its hide, and for a moment it looked alive, breathing. He reached out, fingertips brushing its surface. It was warm. Behind him, his father's voice came softly, It breathes because it remembers, my son. Every beat it ever sang lives inside it still. Then it must be heavy, Kanu said quietly. Adara smiled sadly. It is. That was the first time Kanu truly saw the weight his father carried. Not in his muscles or in his age, but in his soul. And yet, despite all his respect for his father's wisdom, something in Kanu's heart refused to kneel before the past. He wanted to be seen, not remembered. That night, lying on his mat, he dreamed of the drum, but not as it was. In his dream, it was shining, gilded, standing before a crowd of strangers dressed in fine robes. He was there, playing it, while coins rained from the sky and people shouted his name. When he woke, his heart raced. He didn't understand that dreams are often warnings disguised as promises. As the seasons turned, Adara began to slow. His hands, once unshakable, trembled faintly as age crept in. The villagers grew anxious, for the keeper of Okanoran was more than a man. He was the village's heartbeat. When he fell ill, they gathered outside his hut, singing softly in prayer. The air was thick with fear. Kanu sat beside his father, holding his frail hand. "My son," Adara whispered, "when I am gone, the drum will choose you. But know this, it does not serve those who serve themselves. It listens to truth. It hears pride. And it punishes lies." Kanu swallowed, his throat tight. "Father, I will honor it." Adara smiled faintly. "Do not honor the drum. Honor what it stands for. For the drum is not power, it is memory." As the dawn broke, Adara's breath faded with the morning wind. And for the first time in living memory, the village woke to silence. No drumbeat rose to greet the sun. The rhythm of life faltered. They buried Adara beneath the lightning tree where the first ancestor had once carved the sacred drum. The villagers wept, and Kanu stood over the grave, his face a storm of pride and grief. When the ceremony ended, the elders brought forth Okanoran and placed it before him. "It belongs to you now," the eldest said. "Guard it as your father did." Kanu looked down at the drum, his reflection warped in its polished surface. The weight of generations pressed against his chest. He felt both power and fear. His palms trembled as he raised them. Then, with uncertainty, he struck once. The sound that came was strange, neither full nor hollow, not the warm thunder of his father's hands, but a muted pulse, like a heartbeat muffled beneath water. A few elders exchanged glances but said nothing. Kanu looked down at the drum, confused. He did not know, not yet, that the drum recognized hearts. That it could tell when the one who struck it was unsure, restless, or filled with pride. As he carried the drum back into his father's hut, a wind rose suddenly, strong and sharp. It rattled the windows, lifted dust, and for a heartbeat, he thought he heard something, a whisper deep inside the drum. A voice, faint as a sigh. "Remember." Kanu froze, heart hammering. But when he leaned closer, there was only silence. He told himself it was his imagination. He did not know that the drum had truly spoken, not to his ears, but to his spirit. That night, Kanu sat alone in the hut, staring at the sacred drum. The moonlight fell across its carved symbols, each one glowing faintly as if touched by unseen hands. He reached out and placed his palm against it. The air felt alive, charged, like the moment before rain. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled softly, as though answering a memory. Over the following days, the rhythm of Ekunle limped on. Kanu tried to play at festivals, at markets, even at births, but the sound was never quite right. Some said the drum was in mourning. Others whispered that it was testing him. His mother, weary and hollow-eyed, would sit at the doorway each evening and watch him practice. "Your father played with spirit, not strength," she would say softly. "You strike too hard, Kanu. You must listen to it first." But Kanu was young, and grief burned in him like fever. He wanted the drum to obey. He wanted it to sound like his father's, to make the people respect him again. He didn't notice that every time he beat it in frustration, the sound grew duller, colder. Then one evening, as the sun bled into orange behind the western hills, Kanu's mother called him to her side. "My son," she said, her voice low, "your father's spirit walks close tonight. You must pour libation before you play again. Speak to him, and ask for his hand to guide yours." Kanu nodded and fetched the clay bowl, filled it with palm wine, and poured it slowly on the earth beside the drum. "Father," he murmured, "if your spirit can hear me, guide my rhythm." He lifted his hands, struck once, and the sound burst clear and deep, rolling like thunder through the compound. He froze. The villagers stopped what they were doing and turned toward the sound. He struck again. The same deep resonance answered him, not from his strength, but from somewhere deeper, as if the earth itself had joined the rhythm. And for the first time since his father's passing, the drum truly spoke. That night, the people of Ekunle danced. They said the ancestors had returned to bless the boy. They said Odera's blood was strong. But Kanu, lying awake long after the fire had died, could not shake a single thought. "If I can make it sing like this, then I can make it do anything." It was not pride yet, just a seed. But the drum had already heard it. And drums, as the elders often said, remember everything. Nights in Ekunle had always carried music. The crickets chirped in rhythm, the wind hummed between the banana leaves, and sometimes, if you listened closely, you could hear the faint roll of distant drums, like old gods still tapping on the edge of the world. But ever since Kanu's father's burial, the nights had changed. The rhythm of Ekunle was no longer steady, it came and went, broken and strange. And at the center of that silence was Kanu's compound, where the sacred drum now sat beneath a carved wooden frame, guarded by ancestral symbols of protection. The people said that when the last light of the moon faded, the drum came alive. At first, Kanu laughed at their whispers. He told himself it was grief playing tricks on them. But one night, long after the village fires had died and his mother had gone to sleep, Kanu sat alone beside the drum, the same spot where his father used to pray before dawn. He had meant only to sit and remember, but something stirred. It began faintly, a soft vibration in the air, like a deep sigh that seemed to come from the earth itself. Then, slowly, the drum gave a single heartbeat. "Come." Kanu froze. His breath caught. The air thickened. "Come." The sound came again, softer this time, but it was there. He leaned closer, his heart racing, his eyes wide. "Who's there?" he whispered. Only silence answered. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the smooth leather. The moment his skin touched it, a chill ran through his arm. For a split second, he heard something, not words exactly, but whispers. Faint, low, ancient, like voices speaking from beneath water. Then, as quickly as it came, it was gone. He pulled his hand back. The moon slipped behind a cloud, and the drum sat still, silent, as if mocking his fear. For days afterward, Kanu tried to tell himself it was his imagination, a trick of the night. But the sound haunted him. Every evening, when the sky turned the color of dying embers, he would sit again by the drum, waiting. And each night, it would answer him, just faintly enough to keep him curious. Soon, he began to speak to it. "Are you my father?" he would whisper. "Or are you the ancestors?" No reply, only the soft hum of unseen breath through the trees. The villagers began to notice changes in him. He walked with restless eyes, like a man haunted by something unseen. At the market, when he played for the people, his rhythms grew wild, unpredictable, intense. The elders frowned. The drum no longer carried the calm wisdom of Odera's hands. Instead, it sounded fierce, proud, hungry. Old Nwoke, the priest, called to him one afternoon after a performance. "Kanu," he said, his wrinkled face dark with concern. "The drum is not a toy. You play as if you wish to summon thunder. Do you know who listens when thunder answers?" Kanu frowned. "It is only music, father. The people love it." The old man's eyes glimmered. "The ancestors do not love arrogance. The drum hears your heart, not your skill." But Kanu turned away. Praise had become his comfort now. The more people gathered to hear him play, the louder his pride grew. Still, the whispers returned. They came stronger now, clearer. Some nights, he thought he heard words in them, fragments of old tongues, perhaps his father's voice among them. Sometimes the voices laughed. Other times, they wept. One night, after hours of drumming, Kanu collapsed in exhaustion and drifted into a strange sleep. In his dream, he stood before a vast fire, and behind the flames stood figures, dozens of them, old, shadowy, watching. The tallest among them stepped forward. His face was hidden by smoke, but his voice was deep, echoing like the earth itself. "We gave the drum to your bloodline to speak truth. But now your hands strike lies." Kanu fell to his knees. "I only play what the people wish to hear," he cried. "The people's ears do not matter," the voice replied. "The drum does not serve fame. It serves balance." Before Kanu could respond, the fire roared higher, and the shadows vanished. He woke drenched in sweat, the echo of the drum still beating in his chest. The next morning, he found the drum's surface damp, as if it had been played while he slept. His mother, seeing his pale face, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Kanu," she said quietly, "you look troubled." He hesitated. "Mother, when father was alive, did the drum ever speak?" Her eyes widened slightly, then softened with sadness. "Yes, but only to the pure-hearted. When your father was chosen, the ancestors spoke through the drum at night. But he never played for pride. He played to heal, to unite. That is why they trusted him." She paused. "Why do you ask, my son?" Kanu looked away. "No reason. But there was a reason." That night, when the moon rose again, he sat before the drum once more, only this time he did not wait quietly. He struck it. Once. Twice. Again. Harder. Louder. "Speak to me," he shouted. "If you are the spirits, then tell me what you want. Why do you hide from me?" The final strike echoed across the valley. The air trembled. And then, silence. Not the normal silence of night, but a heavy one, like the breath before a storm. Then, from deep within the drum, came a voice, faint, layered, impossible to tell if male or female. "Your heart is louder than your hands. Kanu, beware. For every drum that speaks truth can also speak ruin." He stumbled back, heart pounding. The voice faded, but its words stayed carved in his mind. He tried to tell himself he was dreaming. But when he looked again, the drum's surface had changed. A small, dark mark appeared in the center, like a burn that hadn't been there before. From that night on, Kanu could not sleep without hearing whispers. Sometimes they murmured his name. Sometimes they warned him. But most often, they repeated a single line. "The drum remembers." He would wake with sweat on his brow, his chest tight, and the echo of those words ringing through his mind. And though the villagers noticed his eyes growing hollow and his smiles fading, he told no one. Because deep down, he was not afraid, he was fascinated. He believed the drum was revealing something only he was worthy of hearing. He did not realize, not yet, that the whispers were not gifts. They were warnings. Warnings that his father once heard and obeyed. Warnings that Kanu, blinded by curiosity, would soon ignore. It began with applause, wild, thunderous, unending applause. And it ended with silence so deep it swallowed even the echoes. But between those two moments lived the rise of Kanu, the young drummer who made Ekunle dance like no village had ever danced before. When dawn broke each day, the people would gather in the village square, waiting for the rhythm that shook the earth. The sound of Kanu's drum rolled through the air like distant thunder, drawing children from their huts, merchants from their stalls, and travelers from the dusty roads beyond the hills. In time, he became the pride of Ekunle. People began to call him the lightning drummer, for his hands moved faster than sight. Coins flowed into his hands like rainwater. He played at weddings, coronations, and festivals. Even neighboring villages sent word, begging him to bring the sacred drum and wake their gods with his rhythm. Kanu, once humble and uncertain, now walked with the pride of a king. The same villagers who had pitied him after his father's death now bowed their heads when he passed. The same elders who had doubted his worth now clapped their hands when his music filled the square. And as respect turned to fame, fame turned to temptation. The first time he played for a woman. A traveling dancer named Abani had arrived from the village of Igbejo, a woman with eyes like palm wine under the moon. When she heard Kanu's rhythm, she began to dance before him, her feet light as wind. The drum spoke, and her body answered. Kanu's hands moved faster, harder, louder. Their connection became intoxicating. When the dance ended, the crowd roared, but Kanu's eyes never left Abani's. That night, she told him his rhythm made her heart speak. He told her her movement made his spirit fly. Soon, he discovered that rhythm could conquer not just crowds, but hearts. He played for admiration, but also for desire. His compound, once silent, now filled with laughter, perfume, and the faint jingling of ornaments from visitors who never stayed the night. He forgot the whispers. He forgot the warnings. He played louder, prouder, and every strike of his hand made the drum darker, the tone deeper. At first, the villagers rejoiced. They believed the ancestors blessed him. But then strange things began to happen. During one of his grand performances, a sudden gust of wind tore through the square, extinguishing every torch. People screamed. The drum gave a strange sound, not music, but a long, low moan. Some swore they saw smoke rise from its surface. But when the light returned, Kanu only laughed. "Even the wind dances to my rhythm," he boasted. The crowd cheered again, eager to believe him. Only the elders remained silent. As weeks passed, Kanu's fame reached far beyond Ekunle. Wealthy chiefs from other lands sent for him, offering gold and cattle if he would play at their feasts. He traveled with guards, servants, and women. He bought fine robes and necklaces of coral. At every performance, his drum thundered, but something about its sound had changed. It no longer carried the warmth of his father's rhythm. It struck like lightning, harsh and sharp. Some nights, when the moon rose high, old Nwok the priest would stand outside his hut, shaking his head as the music carried through the wind. "That boy strikes like he's calling war," he muttered. "The drum spirit will not forgive this." But Kanu was beyond listening. He began mocking other drummers, men who once played beside his father. "You strike like dry wood," he would say with a grin. "Your rhythm has no life." He challenged them openly in the square, and when he played, the people cheered for him alone. His pride grew like wild grass after rain. Then came the Festival of Rivers, a great celebration held every 3 years, when all the nearby villages gathered at the banks of the great Oni River to dance, trade, and offer gifts to the water spirits. For generations, Ekunle had been respected for their sacred drum, but never had they sought to compete with others. Tradition taught humility before the ancestors. Kanu changed that. When the elders warned him not to take the sacred drum for sport, he smiled. "Our ancestors would want the world to hear their rhythm," he said. "Would you have me hide it like a coward?" The elders refused to bless his journey. So he left without their permission. When he arrived at the festival, drummers from 9 villages stood ready, each proud, each skilled. But none had the sacred drum. None had his. When his turn came, the crowd fell silent. The moon was high, and the river shimmered like liquid glass. Kanu lifted the drum, his face proud and calm. Then he struck. The rhythm that erupted shook the air. Birds scattered. The water trembled. The other drummers dropped their sticks, stunned. The crowd roared his name. "Kanu! Kanu! Kanu!" He smiled, chest rising with triumph. "Let it be known," he shouted, "that the spirit of Ekunle bows to no one." Then he struck again, and this time, something strange happened. A crack appeared along the drum's rim. Faint at first, but visible. The tone deepened, darkened, a strange vibration that made the river ripple violently. The old high priest of Igbejo stepped forward, alarmed. "Enough, boy. That is no rhythm of man." But Kanu only laughed and beat harder. The river swelled suddenly. A gust of wind howled across the banks, tossing sand and torches into the air. The crowd screamed and scattered. The sky darkened, though there were no clouds. When Kanu struck the drum once more, lightning flashed, a single bolt, bright and furious, and struck the tree beside him, setting it ablaze. Kanu stumbled back, dropping the drum. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the crowd, terrified, fled. When he finally bent to pick it up, the drum's surface was warm, almost burning. And when he touched it, he heard a whisper. "You play not for us, but for yourself." He froze, glancing around, but there was no one. Only the echo of his own heartbeat and the smell of burned wood. He wrapped the drum and hurried back to Ekunle, shaken. But even as he returned, the village was waiting. Word had spread that he had challenged the gods and made lightning bow. Children ran to greet him, chanting his name. Women sang songs of his triumph. The elders, however, watched in silence. Old Nwok met him at the entrance of the square. "The ancestors are angry," he warned. "You used their voice for pride. Return the drum to its resting place and beg for mercy. Kanu smiled faintly. Angry. They gave me power. You saw the lightning. It was their applause. The priest shook his head. Lightning does not clap. It strikes. But Kanu had stopped listening long ago. He built a new hut, large, with a tall fence of carved symbols. He began charging gold for private performances. People came from far and wide to hear him play. Every night, his drum thundered. And every night, the tone grew darker, the whispers louder. The villagers began to feel uneasy. The goats grew restless during his performances. The trees near his compound withered. Still, he played on. The elders met in secret, whispering among themselves. The drum has changed, one said. Its sound is no longer pure. The boy is lost to pride, another replied. They decided to send for Nwok once more, hoping he could speak sense into Kanu. When the priest arrived at his compound, Kanu greeted him with forced politeness. My son, the old man said softly, your father once told me that a drummer's hands speak what his heart cannot. I fear your heart now beats too loudly. Kanu smiled, but his eyes were cold. Perhaps the ancestors prefer a louder heart, old man. The priest sighed. Then may the ancestors judge whose rhythm truly speaks. That night, when Nwok left, the whispers in Kanu's hut grew louder than ever before. He woke in the middle of the night to find the drum glowing faintly in the moonlight, its mark, that dark scar, spreading across the surface like roots. And deep within it, the whisper came again, stronger this time. Every sound carries a shadow, Kanu. Every drumbeat demands its echo. He did not understand. Or perhaps he refused to. He only smiled and said, Then let the echo be louder than ever. And he struck the drum once more, proudly, arrogantly, unaware that with every beat, the shadow he created was coming closer. The air in Ekunle grew heavier than ever before. Even the wind, once playful among the palm fronds, seemed to sulk in stillness. It was as if the entire village was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to end, or perhaps something worse to begin. Kanu sat in the moonlight, his once glorious drum before him. The sacred instrument that had once thundered like a storm now gave only dull, hollow murmurs. He struck it again and again, sweat dripping down his temple, frustration tightening his jaw. Each sound it made was empty, lifeless, without the echo of power it once held. "Why won't you sing?" he muttered, his voice shaking. "Why have you turned against me?" His mother, Adise, watched from the doorway of their hut. Her wrinkled hands clutched her wrapper tightly, her eyes wet with worry. She had seen the signs, the withered yam leaves, the rivers shrinking to cracked mud, the drums of the festival sounding weaker each day. "Kanu," she said softly, her voice trembling, "the ancestors are not pleased. You must stop before the drum stops you." Kanu turned sharply, pride flashing in his eyes. "Stop. When every ear in Ekunle still longs for my sound. When even the neighboring villages bow when I play." He stood, raising his chin toward the dark sky. "I am the drummer of destiny, mother. The spirits blessed me." Adise shook her head slowly. "No, my son. They blessed your father. You inherited his rhythm, but not his heart." Those words pierced Kanu deeper than any spear. He stared at her for a long moment, anger and confusion warring in his chest. Then, without a word, he turned away and stormed into the night, the drum tucked under his arm. That night, the villagers tossed in their sleep. The air was thick, the night animals silent, and from the center of Ekunle came faint, broken beats, like the gasps of a dying spirit. By morning, the sun rose weak and pale. The village well had dried. Chickens lay still in the sand. The elders gathered beneath the iroko tree, whispering prayers to gods who no longer answered. "The drum has stopped," muttered old Nadazi, the eldest of the council. "And with it our reign." When Kanu arrived at the gathering, his eyes were red with sleeplessness. He carried the drum, now wrapped in torn cloth. "I will fix this," he said with hollow confidence. "I just need to find the right rhythm again." But when he sat to play before the elders, not a sound came. Not even a whisper. The drum was mute. The silence that followed was thick and terrifying. Even the birds above fell quiet. In that silence, a sudden gust of wind tore through the village, scattering ashes from last night's cooking fires. The wind carried a sound, a faint echo of thunder from far beyond the hills. The elders exchanged glances. "The spirits have turned their backs," one murmured. "The drum is rejecting him," said another. Kanu stood slowly, trembling. He looked down at the drum, its surface dull and cracked, the sacred carvings fading like forgotten words. He tried to speak, but no words came. His throat was dry, his chest hollow. For the first time in his life, Kanu, the boy who made the world dance, felt utterly alone. And somewhere in the unseen realm of ancestors, a voice whispered, "He who plays for pride shall never hear the song of truth again." That night, Kanu's mother wept quietly by the door. Her son sat by the lifeless drum until dawn, staring at it, waiting for it to speak again. But the drum had chosen silence. And the silence had chosen him. The dawn came without birdsong. A pale mist rolled in from the east, spreading across the quiet fields of Ekunle like a ghostly blanket. The villagers whispered that the gods had abandoned them. The yam vines drooped, the streams trickled to silence, and the sky hung heavy, colorless and unpromising. Kanu had not slept. His eyes were swollen from the long night of staring at the lifeless drum. When he finally rose, the sun was struggling to rise, and his mother sat by the fire, her face drawn with fear and fatigue. "Where are you going, my son?" she asked weakly. "To the river," Kanu replied, tying the drum to his back. "If the drum will not speak to me, maybe the water will. Father used to say that the river carries the voices of our ancestors." Adiz looked at him long, her lips trembling as if to warn him again, but no words came. She only whispered a prayer to the wind as he walked away. The path to the river was lonely. Once, children played along that trail, their laughter echoing through the palms. Now, only Kanu's footsteps and the sighs of the dying wind kept him company. The river, too, had changed. Its once vibrant current was now a slow, muddy crawl, filled with the scent of rot and silence. Kanu knelt by the water's edge, dipping his hands into the cold stream. "If the spirits can hear me," he whispered, "show me what I must do. Tell me why the drum has turned against me." The surface of the river rippled, not from wind, but from something deeper. Kanu froze. A figure was standing across the narrow bank, a tall, dark man in tattered robes that shimmered like smoke in sunlight. His eyes glowed faintly, calm and ancient, like coals that never die. "Who are you?" Kanu called out, startled. The stranger's voice rolled across the water, deep and steady, as if carried by the earth itself. "A traveler. One who walks between breath and dust." Kanu frowned, unsure if the man was mad or divine. "You speak like a riddle." "All truths are riddles until they are lived," the stranger replied. He stepped closer to the river's edge, though his feet seemed never to touch the ground. "You carry the drum of thunder and silence, yet you do not know its hunger." Kanu's heart raced. "You speak of the sacred drum?" The man nodded. "It wakes, Kanu, though not for your songs. The drum listens for truth, not pride. And it stirs now, restless in the hands of a deaf drummer." Kanu stood, his fists tightening. "Who are you to speak to me this way? You know nothing of what I've done for this village." The stranger's face softened, almost in pity. "You play for the praise of men. Your father played for the peace of the spirits. That is why your rhythm falls empty." A cold wind swept across the water, and Kanu felt a strange weight pressing against his chest. He looked again at the man, and in that moment, something shifted. The traveler's reflection in the water was not his own. It flickered like lightning, revealing faces, men and women, his ancestors, countless generations deep, their eyes burning with sorrow. Kanu stumbled back. You're not real." The stranger smiled faintly. "I am real in ways you have forgotten." His voice lowered, almost to a whisper. "Listen well, son of Adara, the drum does not sleep. It remembers. When it beats again, it will not call rain or joy. It will summon truth, and truth is the storm you cannot escape." Before Kanu could speak, the mist rose, swallowing the figure. The river churned suddenly, splashing mud and foam. Then silence returned, an eerie, watching silence. Kanu fell to his knees, clutching the drum tightly to his chest. His heart thundered as if to replace the silence within it. "The drum is waking," he whispered to himself, shivering. "But what truth will it tell?" Behind him, unseen among the reeds, the river whispered like a voice from another world, low, mournful, and knowing. And somewhere deep within the drum on his back, a faint pulse answered. That night, the village of Ekunle glimmered under torchlight, though its spirit was dimmed by drought and fear. The foreign trader, a man named Mr. Dalton, had come with soldiers and gold, promising to buy spices, ivory, and whatever else Ekunle could offer. The elders, desperate for relief, asked Kanu to perform, to honor the visitor and perhaps bring favor back to the land. Kanu hesitated, remembering the warning of the stranger at the riverbank, but pride burned brighter than fear. If the ancestors want truth, he thought, then let them hear mine. So, as dusk deepened into a humid night, Kanu stood in the great courtyard of Ekunle, surrounded by flickering torches, drummers, and dancers. The air trembled with tension. Children peeked from behind their mothers' wrappers, while the elders sat still, eyes heavy with worry. Mr. Dalton lounged on a wooden chair, a pipe between his teeth, watching with mild amusement. Kanu lifted the sacred drum. Its surface felt heavier than before, as though it carried the weight of the world. The crowd fell silent. When he struck the first beat, the sound was wrong. Not the deep thunder that rolled through bone and sky. No, this was hollow, strained, almost like a groan. He hit it again. The drum responded with a high, sharp cry, like a wounded beast. The villagers stirred uneasily. Even the wind seemed to retreat. Kanu forced a smile, hiding his panic. He beat faster, louder, pouring strength into every strike. Sweat streamed down his face. The rhythm rose, broken, chaotic, desperate. Then, suddenly, the drum screamed. The sound tore through the night like lightning splitting stone. The torches flickered violently. A strange gust of wind swirled around the courtyard, kicking up sand and ashes. Kanu staggered backward as the drum's skin began to stretch unnaturally, bulging and pulsing as if something beneath it wanted to be free. He dropped it, but it didn't fall. It floated, spinning slowly in the air, the ancient carvings along its rim glowing with fiery symbols. The traders shouted and ran for cover. The villagers dropped to their knees, some screaming prayers, others crying the names of the ancestors. And then it happened. The drum split open with a thunderous crack. A surge of wind exploded outward, knocking Kanu to the ground. From within the torn drum, shadows poured forth, black mist shaped like people, faces flickering between light and darkness. The air filled with whispers, then with wails. Kanu gasped, clutching his chest as his vision blurred. The world spun, and suddenly he was no longer standing in the courtyard. He was falling through a void of sound and color, surrounded by the echoes of drums from ages past. When he landed, he stood before a vast plain of light. Hundreds, no, thousands, of figures surrounded him, each holding a drum of their own. Their faces were carved from shadow and fire, their eyes glowing like dying stars. "Who are you?" he shouted. His voice echoed endlessly. A single figure stepped forward, his father, Audra, his expression grim. "You have dishonored the rhythm," Audra said, his voice deep and resonant. "You turned the drum of truth into a drum of pride." Kanu trembled. "Father, I only wanted to honor our name, to bring respect to our family." The ancestors murmured as one, their drums beating softly in unison. The sound rippled through the air like waves. "Respect bought with vanity is a curse," said another voice, one ancient and feminine, the spirit of the first drummer, the one who forged the sacred drum beneath the lightning tree. "The drum you carry does not sing for praise. It sings for balance. And now, it screams because truth has been buried." Kanu fell to his knees. "Then teach me. Tell me how to restore it." But the ancestors' faces grew darker, their eyes hollow with sorrow. "The truth cannot be restored until it is faced," the first drummer said. "You have awakened what should have slept. And now, the storm you called will not stop until you learn humility, or until Ekunle is washed clean." Kanu reached out desperately. "Please, forgive me." Audra looked at him one last time. "Forgiveness is not a word, my son. It is a rhythm you must earn." Then the light shattered. The ancestors vanished in a rush of thunder. Kanu's body convulsed on the ground in the courtyard as lightning tore through the sky. The villagers watched in horror as the drum, now nothing but ashes, crumbled at his feet. When he awoke hours later, drenched in rain, he found the people gone. The foreign trader had fled. Only the storm remained, pounding against the roofless heavens, as if the ancestors themselves were drumming in fury. And Kanu, trembling and broken, whispered into the storm, "What rhythm must I play to be forgiven?" But the storm gave no answer. Only the echo of the shattered drum replied, rolling through the hills like distant thunder. The rain that fell after the night of the drum's scream did not bring relief. It fell black and bitter, smelling of burnt leaves and grief. When morning came, the fields were flooded, but the waters were thick and lifeless. The crops that had not already withered now drowned in mud. Ekunle had become a village of shadows. Smoke rose from dying hearths. Children coughed in the corners of empty huts. The once vibrant sound of laughter and drumbeats that filled every dawn had been replaced by a haunting quiet. The air carried the heavy rhythm of sickness and despair. Even the birds had left the trees. Kanu wandered through the silent square, barefoot and sleepless, haunted by the vision of his ancestors. His heart felt hollow, as though the drum had taken a piece of it when it shattered. Wherever he went, people turned away. "There goes the cursed son of Adara," whispered an old woman, clutching her beads. "Because of him, the rain is poison," muttered a man drawing water that smelled of death. Mothers pulled their children close when he passed. Young men spat in the dust behind him. Only his mother, Adise, dared to speak to him. Her voice was frail, yet kind. "You must go, my son," she said one evening as the last red glow of sunset burned over the hills. "The elders will come at dawn. They blame you for everything that has befallen Ekunle. If you stay, they will bury you beside the broken drum." Kanu bowed his head. "And if I leave, what will that change? The curse will remain." Adise's eyes filled with tears. "Perhaps. But the ancestors spoke to you, not them. If there is redemption, it will find you in exile, not here." Before he could respond, a deep horn sounded from the shrine at the center of the village, the call of the council. The elders had gathered. The people assembled in silence, their faces lit by torches and resentment. Chief Duro, the oldest among them, stepped forward. His back was bent, but his voice carried the weight of thunder. "Kanu, son of Adara," he said, "you have angered the spirits of Ekunle. The drum that binds us to our ancestors has been defiled under your pride. Since that night, our fields have rotted, our children have taken ill, and the river no longer sings." The crowd murmured in agreement. Kanu knelt, tears cutting through the dust on his face. "I did not mean to bring this upon us. I sought to honor my father's name." "Honor?" Duro spat. "You turned the sacred rhythm into mockery. You drummed for gold, for women, for applause. The ancestors warned you through silence, yet you beat louder." He raised his staff high, striking it into the ground. "The spirits demand balance. Ekunle must be cleansed. You will leave before sunrise and wander until the gods show you mercy. You may not drink from our well, nor sleep under our roofs. If you return without a sign from the ancestors, your soul will be denied rest forever." The villagers began to chant softly, low, fearful, rhythmic. It sounded less like punishment and more like mourning. Kanu rose slowly, his body trembling. "And if I find that mercy?" he asked. "Then the drum will live again," Duro said, "and Ekunle will forgive." Kanu turned to look at his mother. Her tears shone in the torchlight, but she did not move. She held a small bundle in her hands, his father's old leather pouch, filled with herbs, a few coins, and a carved token of the lightning tree. "Take this," she said, pressing it into his palm. "It will remind you that even in darkness, the ancestors watch." Before dawn, he stood at the edge of the village. The wind moaned through the palm trees like the ghosts of his forefathers. Behind him, Ekunle lay still, a wounded body, breathing faintly in pain. As he stepped into the wild path that led to the unknown, a strange silence followed him. It was not emptiness. It was expectation, as if the spirits themselves waited for his next move. He walked until the torches of Ekunle disappeared behind the mist. And though he tried not to look back, The sound of faint drumming echoed from the hills, slow, distant, like a heartbeat buried in the earth. The drum that was destroyed still lived, somewhere. And Kanu knew then that his journey had only just begun. The road out of Ekunle wound through forests that whispered and hills that brooded in mist. For days, Kanu walked without rest, his feet blistered and his spirit heavy. The land itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting, watching. The trees leaned toward him as though listening for something more than footsteps, as though they too remembered the drum's broken voice. Each night, Kanu dreamed of water. A roaring cascade under a sky split by lightning. In his dream, the same voice always called to him, deep, ancient, and sorrowful. At the sacred falls, truth is washed clean. Follow the river that runs without sound. When he awoke, sweat covered his skin, and the carved token his mother had given him glowed faintly with warmth. He took it as a sign. The ancestors were not finished with him yet. By the 7th day, he found himself walking along a narrow trail beside a dry streambed. The air smelled of dust and forgotten rain. His hunger gnawed at him, and his throat burned. Just when he thought he could go no further, he heard laughter, soft, musical, human. Ahead, beneath a great baobab tree, sat 3 figures around a fire. They looked like travelers, 2 men and a woman, and the aroma of roasted yam filled the air. The eldest of the men, tall and lean with silver hair, beckoned Kanu closer. "Traveler, join us. The road is long, and the night is cold." Kanu hesitated, his eyes darting to the food. His pride whispered that he needed no charity, but his stomach disagreed. He nodded and approached, sitting cautiously near the fire. The woman handed him a roasted yam, warm and fragrant. "Eat, brother," she said with a smile that felt too kind for a stranger. Kanu tore into the food, savoring each bite. It was the first warmth he had known in days. When he was done, the silver-haired man spoke. "Tell us, traveler, what brings you through the cursed hills of Ekunle?" Kanu lowered his gaze. "I seek redemption. I have angered the ancestors and must find the sacred falls to restore balance." The younger man laughed softly. "And do you think walking alone can wash away pride?" Kanu frowned. "What else is left for me to do?" The silver-haired man leaned forward. "We each carry a rhythm within us, Kanu, son of Odera. The question is not whether you can walk, but whether you can listen." Kanu's heart skipped. "How do you know my name?" The man smiled, his eyes glinting like embers. "We have known you longer than you've known yourself." Before Kanu could speak, the fire flared suddenly, bright blue, like lightning trapped in flame. The travelers were gone. In their place stood 3 spirits, shimmering with ethereal light, one draped in flowing water, another cloaked in wind, and the third crowned with earth and flame. Kanu stumbled back, shielding his eyes. "Your first trial begins," said the spirit of water, her voice flowing like a river. "Humility must open the path." Without warning, rain began to fall, heavy and cold. The water spirit raised her hand, and a great flood formed, washing the ground into mud. "If you wish to pass," she said, "you must crawl through the mire and drink from the river's dirt. Only those who kneel before truth can rise again." Kanu hesitated. His pride rebelled. Crawl. Drink filth. He was once the pride of Ekunle, the son of Odera the drummer. But as he looked at the storming sky, he remembered the faces of his ancestors, stern, sorrowful, waiting. He dropped to his knees. The mud was cold, sucking at his hands and feet. He dragged himself forward and drank the gritty water. It burned his throat, but something inside him loosened, like a knot untying after years of tension. The rain ceased. The spirit of water smiled faintly. "So you remember humility. The river will guide you now." She dissolved into mist. Kanu rose to his feet, soaked and trembling, and continued along the riverbed that had come alive again with flowing water. He walked until dusk fell, and the stars blinked awake. At the edge of the forest, he saw an old man struggling to carry a heavy basket of firewood. Without thinking, Kanu hurried forward. "Let me help you, father." The old man smiled, revealing teeth yellowed by age. "Few offer help to the weary in these parts." Kanu carried the basket across the rocky trail until they reached a small hut. The man thanked him and gave him a gourd of palm wine. "May your path be lighter than your heart," he said. When Kanu looked down to drink, the wine shimmered like silver. He looked up again, but the old man was gone. Only the wind answered. The second test had passed, generosity. By the third night, Kanu's path led into a dark gorge. The wind howled through the rocks, carrying strange whispers. His torch flickered, then went out. A sudden cry pierced the air, sharp, desperate, human. Kanu ran toward it and found a young boy dangling from a broken ledge, clutching a root with trembling hands. The drop beneath him was endless. "Hold on!" Kanu shouted. He lay flat, stretching his arm out. "Give me your hand." "I can't," the boy cried. "I'm slipping." Kanu's heart pounded. He braced himself against a rock and reached lower. "You can. Trust me." The boy let go of the root, catching Kanu's wrist. The force nearly pulled him over, but with a roar, Kanu heaved upward. Together, they collapsed onto the rocky ground, gasping. When he turned to check the boy, there was no one there. Only a faint echo of laughter and a single feather glowing faintly in the dust. Kanu held the feather tightly. "Courage," he whispered. The third test. A warm light surrounded him. The air shimmered, and a voice, deep and kind, spoke from the unseen. "You have remembered humility, generosity, and courage, the three beats of a pure rhythm. Follow the river. It will lead you to the sacred falls." Kanu wept quietly as he walked onward. His steps were lighter now, though his heart still carried the weight of his past. But somewhere deep inside, he felt the faintest rhythm, the heartbeat of the drum returning. And as the moon rose over the hills, its reflection danced upon the flowing river, guiding him toward destiny. The river of truth was not on any map. It could not be found by sight or sound, but only by repentance. For days, Kanu walked through plains of dry wind, his feet blistered, his body frail, his spirit burning for forgiveness. His drum hung behind him like a curse, silent and heavy. When he reached the edge of a deep ravine, he saw mist rising, thick and silvery, glowing like the breath of the moon. The ground trembled faintly beneath his feet, and he heard the unmistakable thrum of water beating against rock. Yet the rhythm was not random. It pulsed with a familiar cadence, one that mirrored the drum's voice before it turned silent. Kanu stepped forward. The ravine widened into a waterfall that plunged into a vast, swirling basin below. The air shimmered with energy, as if time itself was held in suspension. He dropped to his knees, weeping. "Spirit of my fathers," he whispered, "I have come to atone." The wind answered first. Then the water. The mist thickened until it formed a shape, tall, radiant, and cloaked in ancient cloths woven from light. It was Adara, his father, yet not as he remembered him. His eyes burned with both love and judgment. "Kanu," the spirit said, his voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere, "why do you carry what you do not understand?" Kanu bowed low, pressing his forehead to the earth. "I only wanted to honor you, Father. I wanted our name to be remembered." "And so you used the sacred to feed your pride," the spirit thundered. "You played not for the ancestors, but for yourself. You turned truth into vanity, and the drum answered your deceit." Kanu's tears fell into the soil, and as they did, the waterfall's roar deepened. From within its waters emerged ghostly shapes, drummers, dancers, hunters, mothers, the ancestors of Ekunle. Their faces were carved in flame and water, shifting with emotion. "Do you know," Adara said, "what lies within that drum you carry?" Kanu shook his head weakly. "The first ancestor, Oba, sought to capture the voice of truth," Adara continued. "He carved the drum from the heartwood of the lightning tree, a tree that had been struck by the sky's own fury. Its wood carried the power of storm and silence. But to give it life, he sealed it with blood, his own." Kanu looked up, eyes wide. "His blood?" "Yes," said the spirit. "The drum's heartbeat is that of the ancestor who first bled for truth. Each time it is struck, it calls to the heavens, but only if the one who plays it is pure of heart. When deceit enters its rhythm, it grows silent. When pride corrupts its tone, it devours its player." Kanu trembling. "Then I have called death upon myself." Adara's expression softened. "Not death, my son, consequence. But every curse can be undone through understanding. The drum has never hated you. It merely demands truth. The waterfall split, parting like a curtain. Within its glowing depths lay a hollow log, ancient, cracked, yet pulsing faintly with golden light. A drum appeared beside Kanu. Adara gestured toward it. "Lay your drum beside the heartwood, and speak the truth you have never spoken," he commanded. Kanu crawled forward, his voice quivering. "I played for glory, not honor. I mocked the sacred to please men. I desired wealth, not wisdom. And in doing so, I betrayed you, father. I betrayed Ekunle." The moment he finished, lightning flashed across the sky. The waterfall's mist burst into radiant light, and a sound like thunder rolled through the valley. The drum shuddered, then began to hum, softly at first, then powerfully, as if the earth itself was joining in. The ancestors' voices filled the air, chanting in a rhythm older than memory. "Kanu, son of Adara, you have remembered the rhythm of truth." The glowing log cracked open, releasing a pulse of golden wind that encircled him. His body was lifted, his spirit purified in sound and light. When the glow faded, the drum was changed, no longer dark and cracked, but radiant, adorned with living patterns that shifted like fire and rain. Adara smiled. "You have learned, my son. Now return to your people. Let the drum speak once more, not for fame, but for harmony." Kanu bowed deeply as the spirit began to fade into mist. "Will I ever see you again?" "You will," Adara's voice whispered, "each time you play with truth in your heart." And then, silence. Only the rush of the river remained. Kanu rose, his hands trembling on the drum. When he struck it once, the sound rippled across the land, pure, deep, alive. The river brightened, trees bent toward the sound, and distant thunder answered like applause. The journey was not yet over, but the truth had been found. The rhythm of his ancestors once again beat within him. The path back to Ekunle was not the same one Kanu had taken when he left. The trees were bare, their branches brittle as bones. The once vibrant fields lay cracked beneath a sun that refused to dim. Yet as Kanu walked, the drum on his back glowed faintly, a soft heartbeat pulsing in rhythm with his own. The villagers had nearly lost all hope. Children coughed from thirst, old men sat in silence, and the riverbed where women once sang was nothing but dust. When Kanu appeared on the horizon, thin, barefoot, and wrapped in a silence that seemed sacred, they could scarcely believe their eyes. "It's him," someone whispered. "The cursed drummer returns," muttered another. But then they saw the drum, restored, shining with a golden pulse, and fear gave way to awe. The elders gathered beneath the withered baobab at the heart of the village. The chief, whose hair had turned white during the drought, stepped forward. "Kanu," he said, his voice trembling between anger and relief, "you left us to perish. You broke the covenant of sound. What do you bring now, redemption or ruin?" Kanu bowed low, the drum resting before him. "I bring truth," he said softly. "And I bring rain, but at a price." A murmur rippled through the crowd. His mother pressed her hands to her heart, tears welling in her tired eyes. "What price, my son?" she asked. "The drum will not sing for me unless I give what is dearest to me," Kanu replied. "The ancestors have spoken. To restore the world, I must offer a sacrifice greater than gold, my pride, my voice, or my life." Silence fell. The wind stilled. Even the birds in the trees seemed to listen. The chief frowned. "Your life, Kanu. You would die to bring back the rain." Kanu smiled faintly. "If life without harmony is life at all, then I have already died." He carried the drum to the sacred circle where his father once performed. The villagers followed, forming a wide ring around him. The sky hung low, swollen with gray clouds that refused to open. Kanu knelt, his hands trembling over the drum's glowing skin. "Ancestors," he whispered, "I have learned your rhythm. Let me now play your truth." He struck the first note, deep and sorrowful. The sound rolled across the earth like thunder from a distant mountain. He struck again, faster this time, the rhythm weaving into a song that seemed to speak every emotion a man could feel: regret, love, repentance, and hope. The drum answered him. It began to glow, brighter and brighter, until it seemed to pulse with the light of the sun itself. Each beat summoned the spirits of his lineage, shadows swirling in the air, faces of men and women long gone, dancing in the mist. Then came the final rhythm, one Kanu had never played before. It was not taught by hands, but by the heart. The sound that followed was not just music, it was prayer, it was surrender, it was the voice of truth itself. As the last note echoed, lightning tore through the clouds. A crack of thunder shook the ground. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet soil. The heavens opened. Rain poured down in torrents, fierce, cleansing, endless. The villagers screamed and laughed, raising their hands to the sky. Children ran barefoot through the puddles. The riverbeds began to fill, singing once more. But Kanu did not move. He sat motionless, the drum still resting beneath his hands. His eyes were closed, his lips curved into a peaceful smile. The rhythm of his heart had merged with the rhythm of the drum, and both had fallen silent together. His mother rushed forward, weeping, holding him close. The chief knelt beside them and whispered, "He gave his life for the truth." Then, a strange thing happened. The drum, lying still between them, began to hum softly, not a song of sorrow, but of peace. And within its hum, faint and clear, was Kanu's voice. "Do not mourn me," it said. "For as long as truth is spoken and hearts beat in rhythm with the earth, I will drum again." Years passed. The rains returned each season. The people of Ekunle rebuilt their farms, their homes, their songs. And whenever a child was born, the elders would take them to the sacred drum, still resting beneath the baobab, and whisper, "This is Kanu's gift, the rhythm of truth." At night, when the moon was full, some swore they could still hear it, a faint beat rolling through the hills. Not thunder, not wind. The heart of a boy who once played for glory, but died for harmony. And so the legend of my family's drum lived on, a rhythm eternal, carved in spirit, rain, and remembrance. Seasons turned into years, and years melted quietly into generations. The memory of Kanu the drummer became a legend, one told by firesides when the moon climbed high and the air smelled of wood smoke and rain. In the village of Ekunle, children grew up hearing his name whispered with reverence. Elders would lift their hands and say, "Kanu beat the heart of truth. May we never forget his rhythm." The drum he left behind rested in the shrine. Its skin had faded, its frame grown ancient, yet it still glowed faintly beneath moonlight, like a sleeping heart waiting for its next pulse. No one dared to strike it. The elders forbade it. They said, "That drum beats for truth alone. To play it for pride is to wake the spirits." The story of my family's drum did not end with Kanu. It lived on, not just in the memories of Ekunle, but in every heart that understood the power of truth and humility. The drum became more than an heirloom. It became a reminder that greatness without virtue is an empty echo. From Kanu's pride and downfall to redemption, the rhythm carried the lessons of generations. The drum had beaten for greed, and it had beaten for grace. It had been silenced by arrogance and awakened by repentance. And through it all, it remained faithful to its one sacred purpose, to speak only for truth.